Eleonora, can we have the recording after some time? As in, we still have 5 minutes to start.
Hi, Amrita. You mean you would rather cut it for now, I guess, right? That's what
Yeah, we don't want the recording now. We could start when we begin.
Yeah, actually, I was advised by our technical focal point that we should restart it. But you know what? I'm going to pause it that way.
Yes, as in you can pause it.
Yes, let's do that.
Yes. This is Luis. No, thank you. Yes, we can actually pause the recording is already paused, but we just need to start streaming.
Yeah, absolutely fine, Luis. It's just that we can pause it. That's what, perhaps I used the wrong word there.
No, that's okay. Yeah, it's okay now. So just for you to know that we are already streaming, but that's fine. So it's a meeting starting in 4 minutes. All the tapping done. So this meeting is already being streamed. It can be cut later if needed, and the recording can just be started like in 2 minutes or so. Thank you, Eleonora, and all.
Lucian, you're here. Do you want to try your audio and video once?
Sure. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, but we can't see you.
Yeah, I'm just connecting. Yeah.
And Imbobana, do you want to try out once?
Hi, Amrita. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see and hear you. Is Sheetal around? I haven't seen her yet. No. We still have 3 minutes, so I guess she'll be joining in. Yes, we can see you, Lucian.
Excellent.
So we're waiting for John and Sheetal now. Hi, John, welcome. Do you want to try your audio and video once?
Sure thing, Amrita. Good to see you, and hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yes, we can. Thank you
Wonderful.
for joining. So we don't have Sheetal here yet, and Mallory is going to join in some time. So Eleonora, should we start at now, or should we wait for another 2 minutes? What would you suggest?
We have a 2 to 3 minute count in the secretariat. It's perfectly fine to wait another couple of minutes if you'd like. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we wait for another 2 minutes. Yes, I can see you, Mallory. Thank you for joining. and really appreciate, you managing the time with the challenges. Louise, Sheetal mentions that she seems to be in a waiting room.
Sorry, there are no waiting rooms in this
Yeah,
session.
that's what.
She can just please share the link.
I'll tell her to get in touch with you.
Okay. I mean, this is the link. I'm going to put it in the chat for you.
Okay. Thanks.
It's the second one. The second one. She can just.
Okay, I sent her one. Let me just send.
Yeah, the second
Okay.
one. Okay, that's a direct link. She just puts name and email address and immediately enters the Zoom session. No waiting rooms here.
Okay, Eleonora, I think we can start, and then perhaps Sheetal joins in. Joyce, may I request, if possible, for you to moderate the chat till Sheetal comes, if that's okay with you? Or we can manage, I guess.
Sure, not an issue.
Right, thank you so much. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. And my name is Amrita, and I am a MAG member. Sheetal Kumar is supposed to be the chat moderator. And this is on the issue area of trust, security, and stability. And it is one of the IGF 2021's introductory session. This is a 90-minute session, and we want it to be interactive. So please, share your views and opinions in chat, because we want an open discussion, and please feel free to tweet about it. And we have several distinguished people who will be sharing their views. So Eleonora, if you want, you can share the names of people who are here today. For some, it's past midnight. For some, it is reasonably okay. So we have Lucien Castex, who is a MAG member and also leading this, one of the co-leads of this working group, who would be giving an overview of it. Then we would have Sheetal Kumar, who would be speaking and sharing certain definitions on the key issues related to trust, security, stability. We'll have Imbana, share a bit of what you can expect in the IGF 2021 sessions this year and the BPF on cybersecurity. So we have divided into 3 sections. The first is introduction of what we plan to do, what the IGF is at a high level. The second is going into thematic approaches, where we have divided these into 4 key cluster issues. And we have Zhaodong Li and Anastasia Kazakova, who would be speaking on cyber norms and standards. I'm not getting into all their designations. You can read about that. We have John Herring and Michael Ilishibo, who would be speaking on issues related to cybercrime. Then for cybersecurity cooperation and capacity development, we have Adli Wahid. And for security and digital products and encryption, we have Mallory Nodal. For each of the sections, we have some time left for interaction. And the last part is where we want to hear and get your feedback on, we have planned our main session. In case we are missing something, please, share your views on it. What could make it more meaningful, or if we are missing some critical issue. Sorry. In India, it's Diwali tomorrow, so you'll be hearing crackers at times. I apologize for that. And how we can have more people engaging in the discussions at Katowice. If they are there, great. If they are joining online, that's also great. We want it to be interactive. So this is what we planned today, but I will now pass it on to my fellow colleague, Lucien, Lucien, if you could, give an overview of what the participants can expect from this session. And 5 minutes we have.
Yeah, thank you, Amrita. I'll try to be quick and to present quickly the key topics and then what participants can expect from the session. So I'm Lucien Castex, as Amrita presented. I'm a MAG member and I'm from AFNIC. Bonjour à toutes et à tous, directly from France, sitting in Paris. It's 4 p.m. here in Paris. And basically, the aim of all this preparatory phase is to engage the community ahead of the Internet Forum held in Katowice next month from 6 to 10. I'll get into it and dig a bit in the specifics. We want to take your views on the key thematic track, and today we have 90 minutes on trust, security, and stability. So trust, security, and stability, as of this year, 2021, we estimate over 4 billion people have access to the internet. People are using internet for banking, for studying, emailing, for reading, for searching information, and so on. And while the COVID-19 pandemic has transformed the way we work and communicate, with internet traffic increasing immensely following confinement measures and lockdowns, the crisis has also shed light on numerous challenges and risks related to cybersecurity, also to privacy and to other key fundamental rights. The pandemic has also created a new generation of critical infrastructures. Lockdown measures that most countries worldwide have put into place illustrate the need for everyone to stay connected. And this is a key issue for citizens with an increasing use of online tools. As for internet policy related to trust and security, we have a number of examples. First, we have the European Union, for example, nowadays, in the context of a political drive towards digital transformation. We have discussion about the EU strategy for cybersecurity with the NIS2 directive. We also have presented last December 2020 draft for a Digital Services Act and a Digital Market Act. And of course, other areas such as the US, China, or Africa have other approaches. At the global level, the UN two main bodies are the Open-Ended Working Group and the Group of Governmental Experts, with the aim to develop norms for state behavior in cyberspace and build trust. But we also have other instruments. For example, we have the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace, presented in November 2018, launched in Paris during IGF 2018 by President Emmanuel Macron, with over 79 states, 390 organizations and 700 companies supporting the call. We have the Christchurch call to eliminate terrorism and violent extremist content online, launched in May 2019 by French President Emmanuel Macron and New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. And the call had a number of key outcomes, such as a shared crisis response protocol. And of course, we have, just to mention it, the Convention on certain conventional weapons with the issue of lethal autonomous weapon systems. So as I was presenting, the aim of that preparatory phase is to engage the community and have your feedback. First, to define the scope of the issue. What is cybersecurity, stability? And key speakers will be trying to dig in, and we are waiting for your views. Also, my colleague Lambonana will be providing a high-level overview of the trust and security track with the workshop selected by the MAG for IGF 2021. We need your inputs from the perspective of your region, your stakeholder group, and your expertise. Your differences are what make the IGF rich and different. What's going on in France, what's going on in Russia, what's going on in India. That's what's interesting at the local level that we want to bring at the global level in Katowice. Is there anything missing in the program? Basically, we want to have common expectation for IGF 2021 and further have a meaningful discussion leading the way to tangible outcomes in Katowice, online and on site. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucien. You have spelled out most of the developments which are going on, and most of the speakers will speak on it. So I'll move to Sheetal first. Sheetal Kumar from Global Partners Digital. So Sheetal, can you provide an overview of the range of ways or issues, areas being discussed by the IGF, and that includes the work being done by BPFs and DCs, and obviously, issues related to definitions.
Thanks so much, Amrita. Great to see you all here from all over the world and across different time zones. I'm coming to you from London, so I know it's a kind of more reasonable time zone perhaps for me than for others. So thanks for being here. So I think it's really a question of trying to figure out what doesn't relate to trust and security online, or trust and security of the internet when it comes to the IGF's broad mandate and range of topics that are being discussed. Because as we have seen over the past 20 or so months, our lives are so dependent on a secure internet. And it's really important to be able to maintain not only that resilience, but the openness of the internet. And so the workshops at this year's IGF relating to trust and security showcase the sheer level of interdependency between this topic and everything else on the agenda, which I think my colleague Lambonana will come on to next. But I did want to just give you a brief overview of what the intersessional work streams are covering, and that is the Best Practice Forum on Cybersecurity, as well as the Dynamic Coalition as well on Internet Standards, Security and Safety. So this year, the Best Practice Forum has been focused on the use of norms. And by norms, I'm talking about the expected standards of behavior in cyberspace of different actors, as they've been elaborated and adopted in different forums, including the UN and through other spaces and forums as well. So those expected standards of behavior, how have they actually how they actually played out in the so-called real world. So taking the text of norms and seeing how they've been applied, that's been a key element of the BPF's work this year. So taking a deeper look at the drivers of cyber norms and testing these concepts against historical internet events. And this builds on previous years that have considered cyber norms. And so just to give you a brief overview, the first work stream of the BPF has, as I said, taken a deeper look at cyber norms and drivers. These include concerns raised by internet users, security incidents, and other events. The second work stream has looked at different criteria to select those historical events or incidents that have occurred that are relevant to the application of cyber norms. It's reviewed those and analyzed whether or how cyber norms have been successful in mitigating their adverse effects. And then it's also bringing the voices of those who have been affected by these events to the table. So that's just kind of an overview, but the report will be presented at the IGF this year, so we encourage you to come to that and also to provide your views at this point. And then on the Dynamic Coalition on Internet Standards, Security and Safety, again, this is an intersessional work stream that in the true spirit of the IGF brings together different stakeholders as well as the BPF, with the shared goal of making online activity and interaction more secure and safe by achieving widespread and rapid deployment of existing internet standards and best practices. There are 3 working groups, the first looking at security by design, the second education and skills, and the third procurement and supply chain management. And these working groups are defining research proposals that will be published soon on the website and expected that they'll conclude in early next year. The report from the working groups will be presented at the Dynamic Coalitions session, of course, at the IGF in a month's time, and conclusions and next steps from both the BPF and the DC will be disseminated to all the NRIs, the relevant institutions, and other stakeholders. So we really encourage you to come to those sessions and to provide your feedback on these important outputs, as well as support the dissemination of them. So I hope that's helpful, and looking forward to hearing from you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheetal. Imbunana, would you like to come in now and share, what are the sessions we have this year related to trust and security?
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor, Amrita. Greetings from Madagascar. I'm Imbunana. I'm a MAG member and BPF cybersecurity co-facilitator. The Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group has opted for an issue-driven approach this year to design the IGF 2021 program. The goal is to work with fewer issues treated in greater depth, so it will facilitate the creation of more focused and structured IGF outputs, including the key messages. I want to explain the process. The MAG launched a call for issues late in 2020, and then the call for issues produced over 230 responses, which were clustered and prioritized. From those responses, the MAG agreed on 2 main focus areas and 4 emerging cross-cutting issue areas. Trust, security, stability is one of the IGF 2021 emerging and cross-cutting issue areas. The discussions will cover norms, standards, guidelines, best practices, and capacity building to manage cybersecurity-related risks and foster collaboration between countries, institutions, and stakeholder groups. That said, this year, 16 workshops from different organizers are approved for trust, security, stability, and they will be spread over the 4 days of the IGF. They will call speakers and experts from different parts of the world. We have a chance today to have some of them in this preparatory session. I will not describe the workshops one by one, but I just want to mention a few of them, like the next chapter of UN Cyber Dialogues, education, who's looking at cybersecurity, democracy and online voting, challenges and innovations. You have talked about IoT and artificial intelligence misuse. There are so many important subjects that address the policy questions for an internet trusted by its users. What are the international mechanisms that already exist, and where do those mechanisms fall short? What can be done to strengthen the security and to reinforce the trust? And how to ensure a safe digital place for all users, including vulnerable citizens. And also, we'll talk about the accountability for state and private sector. In addition to those workshops, as said earlier by Sheetal, the BPF Cybersecurity will have also a dedicated slot to share this year's work, research paper, and outreach. This was a brief overview of what we can expect from the Trust, Security, Stability workshops. But to conclude my speech, I would like to invite everyone to participate, as this process benefits from the creativity of a multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary approach. This is the IGF. Discussions are open, inclusive, and transparent for dialogue and collaboration. Over to you, Amrita.
Thank you, Imbonana, for sharing what are the discussions and why people need to be there. In case anyone has any questions for till now, you want to share anything, please feel free to raise it before we go into the next section. As in, you can put it in the chat and we can read it out. Else, we will move to the next section. Okay, so I don't see anything going. So we'll move to the next section, and this is on the thematic approach. And, as I mentioned, we have divided into 4 key cluster issues: cyber norms and standards, cybercrime, cybersecurity, cooperation and capacity development, and security of digital products and encryption. So we will go to cyber norms and standards. And as Lucien mentioned, there has been a lot of development in OEWG, UNGGE. There are business who are coming up with, a lot of norms. I would like to hear, Xiaodong, your views, and Anastasia, your views on the topic of cyber norms and standards. Could this year's work be linked to the previous years? Is there anything missing or new issues that needs to be discussed at the IGF and which we are missing? And also your take in the current, discussion on norms which is going on. So Xiaodong, I'll start with you and then we'll go to Anastasia. And to all the speakers, just in case you have any other comments of what the speakers are saying, you can put it on the chat, or, you can, when we have the open discussion, you can, share your views. So Xiaodong, over to you.
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm very happy to be invited on this meeting, so to discuss the cyber norms and standard. But my topic, I think I want to mention to make the rules and the norms on data governance in the new era of the internet, in such a new development of the digital era. Why I want to mention this, in the past years, even IGF, we have discussed a lot of issues relevant to the security, stability, and resilience of the cyberspace. But now, I think from the past 50 years, internet have go to a new stage of how to use the data to improve the digital economy. Of course, we have a lot of discuss about the internet governance, and on internet itself, there's a lot of governance issues. But in the past years, we have solved a lot of issues. But what's the key value of the internet? My view is the key value of the internet is to transfer the data, and to collect the data, transfer the data, and store the data is a key value of the internet. But now I think we need to discuss the data governance issues. As you mentioned, that we have a lot of norms or regulations we discussed in different platforms, including UN. But I think UN is a nice platform to discuss that. But so many expert group is only include the representative from the government. But I think that for IGF is a nice model for using the multi-stakeholder model. We need to collect more representatives from different area, including the government, but also in the community. And I still remember that I have a very wonderful experience in the Global Commission on the Stability of the Cyberspace. So it was composed by the different representatives from the multi-stakeholder. So we worked together to develop the 8 norms about the cyber stability. And we also contribute the norms into different platforms. I think it's good. But now I think we need to use similar model to develop the rules or norms of the data governance. Why I emphasize the data governance very much, of course, we have a lot of discussion in IGF to discuss how to use the data but now there is a big issue because now every country or every economy recognize the value of the data. So many countries have their own rules or laws or regulation about the data, especially even in China. So this year we have 2 new laws was published. One is the Personal Information Protection Law, and another one is the Data Security Law. Both laws are relevant to the data governance. Of course, in Europe we have GDPR and also new regulations, and also in American, have the new laws was published by different states. So there's from our research, there's over 140 economies have their own regulation or rules about data governance or data security. That's a big issue. We want to use the one internet to transfer data, but when every economy recognizes the value of the data, they want to protect the data. So in some sense, it's a barrier for the data flow. So if we cannot have the data flow around the world, we'll lower down the value of the internet itself. So, but I think we cannot avoid the trend to protect the data. We need to build some kind of platform to discuss how to make the rules, how to find the common consensus about data governance. Otherwise, for any economy, for any enterprise, so they cannot do the compliance of the data governance. So that means they need to spend a lot of big cost to have the compliance of the data security laws in different countries. So they need to know what's the common consensus of the data security or data governance. So now I'm working on to build a new commission on data governance around the world. We want to use the multi-stakeholder model. It has been approved very successful for the governance models, governance issues. So how to build this commission on data governance and how to make sure we can develop the new rules on data governance is my topics in the next phase and in the next couple of years. So I hope that I can get more comment on you all and to raise this question in IGF to ask more people to have more attention on this and also have more contribution on these issues. That's the issue I want to propose for this session for cyber norms and the standard.
Right. Thank you so much, Xiaoding. Anastasia, would you like to come in and share the business perspective?
Thank you so much. Hello to everyone. I've been kindly asked by organizers to share about what we could weigh within this IGF in terms of the discussions on cyber norms, and I I hope that when we talk about cyber norms, we actually refer to the same notions, actually those norms that have been agreed on by states in 2015, and those non-binding norms that are part of the UN Cyber Stability Framework. Speaking of the sessions and discussions that we already may see, everyone might see in the IGF schedule, I think there's a lot of really fantastic sessions that focus in on the implementation of the norms. And I just want to highlight some of the sessions where I'm not really a part of, but I really find them super, super interesting. Those sessions that specifically focus on the supply chain governance and security for IT resilience, sessions that speak about the neutrality through the multi-stakeholder cyber norms dialogue. Session also, again, being focusing on the security of digital products, and us also targeting the non-binding norm on the integrity of supply chains. Session as well, I think here drawn as well among the organizers about the espionage, not espionage as usual. I think it's also a quite interesting session for all of us to follow in upcoming IGF. I would also share our personal experience. We decided to take part in the IGF for the first time last year. It was the first in a virtual experience. I think I've never been a part of the physical IGF, but I heard a lot how it's really great to be truly a part of the several days of the physical networking with the many experts within the IGF. But hopefully it may happen later this year in Poland. But so far, when we first decided to participate in IGF, we proposed the session, and last year we organized on the supply chain security. And I think we were mainly motivated by the desire to actually understand, okay, they are already established norms, but how far those norms are being implemented across different jurisdictions, across different sectors. These questions we were tried with different partners, both coming from the public and the private sector, from academia and civil society, to discuss last year. And I think following, again, the principle of being more consistent, because we understand that we will not be able to have all the answers just for 90 minutes of discussion. This year, again, we continue the supply chain topic, but through a slightly different lens. Through the lens of the Paris Call, there's a multi-stakeholder initiative of the French government, and hopefully we will be able to have more insights, and especially what has happened since the SolarWinds case that happened this year, late this last year, and how the emerging regulatory industry approaches have matured so far, and what answers we have. Then also, again, following the focus on the implementation of the existing norms, we have our sessions this year that specifically focus on the critical infrastructure. The session is called One Click to Attack Critical Infrastructure and What We Can Do About This. The aim of the session is to solicit views and to hear views from the cyber ambassadors and representatives of states, how the national frameworks to protect critical infrastructure are organized, what are the key elements, if they're harmonized or not, and how actually states have progressed so far, have advanced so far in the norm implementation. The other part of the session, which I personally really hope to identify and discuss with all participants, is the opportunities for establishing the UN sort of phone book in terms of in the event of the critical significant cyber events. If it is possible to have any sort of global, truly global mechanisms for states, for point of contacts from states to coordinate the actions if critical infrastructure has been attacked and it is significant severe cyber incident. And the other session, just I wanted to also highlight, understanding that everybody might be really tired of continuous Zoom sessions, we also wanted to make something really interactive and new this year. So we also will be having a game training called Cyber Stability Games. This is the game that was specifically designed for all non-techies, those people who don't have any technical background, including diplomats, to learn the complexities of technical attribution, being placed in the simulated environment and trying to deal with the attack at the UN in our fictional reality. So this one more sessions that we will be together with Diplo Foundation organizing at the IGF this year. And lastly, answering to the question that again I have been kindly asked by organizers, what are we missing this year in the IGF? I think it's a little bit difficult to answer right now, because even though judging from the titles and descriptions of the sessions, I think it's yet to see how those discussions will be detailed or not. But I think one of the topics we might be missing already is the topic of cybercrime, especially in the light of the upcoming the work of the ad hoc committee within the UN, and hopefully within the next track, John or other participants today will talk a little bit more about cybercrime. So I think that's all inputs from my side. Would be happy to answer any questions in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. You have summarized it very well and highlighted the interesting sessions which we can expect. So I'll move, as you said, to the section on cybercrime. And here we have John Herring from Microsoft and Michael Ilishebo, who is from the Cybercrime Investigation Department of Zambia. So, my question to both of you is, amongst the discussions which are happening this year, what do you think are interesting in terms of the workshops? Are you seeing any linkages which this year's workshop would have with, with the IGF's normal activities? And what are we missing in these discussions? What should have been there or what we should add? So John, I start with you and then we go to Michael.
Sure. Thanks so much, Amrita, for including myself and Microsoft in today's discussion. And thanks to the other speakers as well. And I think, very much looking forward to engaging, especially on some of the cyber norms conversations that were brought up by earlier speakers. On cybercrime, I think Ms. Kazakova took the words right out of my mouth. I think there is a lack of focus, or at this time, from what I can tell, on cybercrime as an issue, a priority topic at this year's IGF, at least, especially in light of the new cybercrime treaty negotiations. So I just want to take a couple minutes to flag that and put that on folks' radars as a priority issue area moving forward, I think, for the IGF, and something that should at least feature in conversations we're all having at this stage. And it begins with the importance of just cybercrime as an issue area. Microsoft released, and I'm actually going to cite a few different recent publications that I'll link in the chat immediately after this. But Microsoft just last month released its annual digital defense report, which sort of is the security summary from the company based on all of our security teams analyzing trillions of signals around the world, just as we understand it. And cybercrime trends are not encouraging. It continues to be an issue area that escalates in both scale and sophistication across the board. And I think very concerningly also in professionalization, largely in the absence of sufficient enforcement, or some countries simply turning a blind eye. This continues to be a low risk, high reward area for criminal activity. And so it's unsurprising that it continues to grow. Phishing and identity-based crime continues to be the dominant vector for these forms of attacks. But also ransomware, of course, has been grabbing headlines in particular over the past year. And I think what's been most disheartening has been the unique focus on healthcare as a target for cyber criminal activity, especially amid the ongoing pandemic. It is one of the top 5 sectors targeted by ransomware. It's in the top 10 of all phishing attacks around the world. And so this is clearly an area that needs greater attention from an international community. It's a global challenge that requires international cooperation, capacity building, so that law enforcement have the tools, resources, and support to combat cybercrime. It also means governments need to take greater responsibility for criminal activity originating within their borders, even when the ultimate victims lie elsewhere. There are existing legal instruments, most notably the Convention on Cybercrime or the Budapest Convention, though after 20 years, it still only has about a little over 60 government supporters, or governments who have fully ratified the agreement and signed on and are able to fully implement it. However, just the rise in cybercrime is not the only reason this is an area of concern now. As Anastasia mentioned, there is a new proposal for a new cybercrime treaty at the UN, which I think has pluses and minuses in terms of how it is being received. I want to be clear here about what we mean, at least at Microsoft, when we talk about cybercrime. These are cyber-dependent offenses and cyber-enabled crimes where the scale, scope, and speed of the offense is increased by the use of a computer. What this doesn't include are things like political speech or dissent or other forms of free expression online. It also doesn't include traditional crimes that simply have some kind of online activity as a component of them. Because while the scourge of cybercrime is very real, what's nearly as concerning for a number of years has been some government efforts to criminalize free expression or undermine human rights, kind of in the name of combating cybercrime. And so this is why Microsoft, others in industry, and the broader multi-stakeholder community have been concerned about forthcoming negotiations at the UN around a proposed new cybercrime treaty. Because while this could be an opportunity for genuinely expanding international cooperation, some nations may also view it as an opportunity to exert greater control in the digital domain. At the end of last month, countries started submitting their initial statements to these dialogues, which I think have raised some concerns and also highlighted some possible paths forward. On the more concerning side, the draft text that was put forward by the Russian Federation, seemed rather preoccupied with sovereignty as an approach to be protected as part of this treaty, as opposed to sort of focusing on potential victims of cybercrime. And in many places, the language in the draft text they put forward raises concerns that it could open the door to criminalizing the work of journalists, as well as broader free speech and political dissent online, as well as set precedent for greater domestic surveillance. With that in mind, there are multi-stakeholder contributions to these dialogues as well that have started. Microsoft was proud to support and sign on to what was called the Multi-Stakeholder Manifesto on Cybercrime, released by the Cybersecurity Tech Accord and the Cyber Peace Institute last month as a contribution to these dialogues. It lays out from the multi-stakeholder community process expectations as well as content expectations for any resulting cybercrime treaty, to serve as sort of a guidepost throughout the negotiations at the UN. On the process side, this includes ensuring that negotiations are including a multi-stakeholder approach, that there is transparency, that there is a limited scope to what is going to be addressed by the treaty, and that it adopts a consensus-driven approach. And then on the content side, insisting that it be focused on protecting victims, upholding international commitments, maintaining international legal obligations, focusing on accountability, while also preserving a free and open internet. I'll also share a link to this as well after I'm done here. From Microsoft's perspective, there is a lot of opportunity here for a successful treaty, although there are real concerns. But working on things like exchanging information, reforming mutual legal assistance processes, and finding new ways to go after cyber criminals while not inviting the repression or undermining of rights would certainly be worthy of greater international attention. But a new cybercrime treaty should not seek to redefine or redress things that are already addressed in existing commitments, non-cyber specific crimes. The discussion paper submitted by the UK government in particular, I think we thought had some interesting suggestions ahead of the January negotiations. It does a nice job balancing those various concerns and identifying where a new treaty could be helpful. And so circling now to sort of engagement in IGF as the premier space for multi-stakeholder deliberation on issues critical to the online world, the Internet Governance Forum and its community of participants should be closely following this issue space, we believe, as treaty negotiations get underway. While I don't see any dedicated sessions at this year's IGF, the good news is this will be a multi-year process at the UN, and so there will be subsequent opportunities for engagement. And then finally, the UN has, I think just this week, released its application for participation in the January meeting of the ad hoc committee that's responsible for these negotiations, that's open to the whole multi-stakeholder community. And I'll share that in the chat as well if folks want to sign up. So I'll end there, but I think that's what's top of mind for Microsoft's side on cybercrime.
Thank you so much, John, and also for sharing that about the call for people who want to participate. So Michael, you come from the government and from Zambia. I would like to hear your perspectives.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you.
Thank you. Basically, the 2021 IGF has many issues. As a former MAG member, I still believe that it's not every issue that is trending that can be captured in a given period, in a given year during the IGF. It's not like every topic that is trending. It's not like every other topic that will be accommodated, because each year comes with its own theme and each session must align itself to that theme. So basically, looking at the 2021 IGF, I think it has addressed many issues over the last couple of years. Trust, security, and other issues have always popped up through the dynamic coalition and other programs. So basically, from the African perspective, and because I may not just speak as a Zambian perspective, I will just speak as an African perspective. There are many issues that we still feel that can still be discussed during the session in Katowice in next month. So basically, one of the major issues the African continent is facing, and African countries in particular, is the new UN treaty on cybercrime, which was actually pushed in by Russia. I think John has expressly put it rightfully to say, if you look at what these other countries are proposing, to some, it's a good idea, but to some, it's even a much better idea for them to push reforms to more like tramp on the citizens' rights and even make freedom of expression non-existent. So basically, if you look at the proponents of the UN Treaty on Cybercrime, you look at the first 5 countries that supported it in 2019 when it was actually pushed by Russia. One of them, I think, was China, Venezuela, I think Syria, and other African countries. But if you look at what is happening in those countries, at that particular time, 2019, you would actually understand why that issue was being pushed and supported just there and then. Then, if you look at other treaties, the Budapest Convention, this year clocked, is it 20 years? 20 years since it was first drafted. We also have the African Convention on Cybersecurity and Data Protection, which we famously call the Malabar Convention. But if you look at ratification of these 2 treaties, it's from the African perspective. From the African side, I think it has been on a poor side. Like I may understand on the Budapest Convention, because by the time it was drafted, many African countries had no cyber laws then. Many countries had not experienced any issues of cybercrime because of the low ICT usage at that time in Africa. Internet connectivity was almost at 5% or 10% in some African countries. But fast forward, we move 20 years later, almost every African country has internet. Almost every African country is facing the cybercrime scourge and its implication on the economy heavily now. But what has an African country taken? What steps have they taken to ensure that they are able to sign some of the treaties? How many African countries have signed the Budapest Convention? Not to come home and talk about the Malabar Convention. So basically, if you talk about the UN treaty, you find many African countries talking about it now, while neglecting other treaties that had existed in the last couple of years. Because if you look at the Malabar Convention, I think should have been 2014, but the Budapest is 2001, so which is 20 years plus almost 7 years. The next issue has to do with one major issue actually that I speak from the bottom of my heart with a passion is the monetary threshold when it comes to combating cybercrime from the African perspective. What is deemed to be huge sums of money, which our counterparts say in Europe or from the US or other regions outside Africa, can help the continent in recovering some of the monies that are stolen, or monies that Africans lose to these criminals who are located outside Africa. Most of the monies are deemed to be too low. There's a monetary threshold in which, like Interpol or Europol, that they can make a serious follow-up to ensure that some of these funds are recovered and sent back and protected back to Africa, and these criminals are arrested and arraigned before the courts of law. Unfortunately, $100 in Africa to an African person is probably almost 50% of his salary, or even 100% of his salary. But to somebody in Europe, it's more like something that they can use just to go and put gas in a car. So basically, if a criminal steals, say, $30,000 from 1,000 Africans, from 1,000 Africans. It means that it is difficult to say, as Zambia, if we push that we repatriate some funds, say from Germany, and we tell them the amount is just about $17,000, they'll still deem it to be something that is way too low for them to make a serious follow-up. As a result, this has created a breeding ground for cyber criminals to thrive. This also comes in when it comes to the issues of international cooperation. We are able to, the African nations and government and law enforcement are able to cooperate, but I think the cooperation is one-sided. It's like what the West wants, they always get. Now, what the Global South wants, they can't get it because of some rules and regulations that have been put in place. The other thing is we have to talk about is capacity building. If you look at the African law enforcement officer as compared to somebody in the West or in the East, most of them are well equipped. Most of them have the zeal and they have the tools to fight cybercrime. When it comes to Africa, I think it's almost non-existent. It normally takes an officer interest to understand and learn some of these things, even watch videos on YouTube to understand how to fight crimes, which is supposed to be the work of the state to ensure that officers are able to perform their duties. Because this is coupled with lack of legislation, because you can't fight a crime that is not yet law in your country. And yet huge sums of money are leaving the country through these cyber criminals. So basically there are many issues that we can talk about, or that we shall talk about, though the time might be limited in terms of the time I've been given to speak. But we'll try at all costs that during the main session next month, we find ways and means of addressing some of these issues from the global community, but at a global stage during the global IGF next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. As in, you've raised very critical issues from Global South. It's just not in Africa. Many regions, even in Asia, have the similar kind of issues. But, the challenges are quite similar. So thanks for highlighting them. And now, is we have Adli to speak on, and that is on cybersecurity cooperation and capacity development. And Adli, my question is similar, as in how do you look at it? Are there any sessions in IGF which is looking at these issues? Are we missing something, and how can we build the linkages?
Sure. Thank you, Amrita. Hello, everyone. My name is Adli from APNIC, and thank you for having me tonight or today. So let me start by saying that, cybersecurity is definitely an interesting topic, and most of us just finished celebrating the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We were able to participate in many of these activities within the Asia Pacific region. And I think there is still huge opportunities to discuss various topics that people are interested in. Some of them are really basic ones, such as the ones mentioned by my colleagues earlier. But there are also other issues that are a bit deeper, more than just about managing risk and making sure that individuals are safe from online threats. There are also, a lot of people echoing the need to have more capacity development, better collaboration. And this brings the question of whether are we not really addressing these issues, right, for all of these years. So I think one thing that is of interest, from my perspective at least, that in a lot of these discussions, the discussion of cybersecurity have gone beyond the technical discussions. So there's more now focus on the human element, the victim, the human as a victim, their well-being is important, that we are not only securing critical infrastructure, but also the users that are relying on those systems. And I think a lot of these discussions has come up, especially with the focus on things like ransomware. I think, the colleagues earlier mentioned that we need to focus on some of these cybercrime related topics. So I think ransomware is one of the mostly discussed topic. And again, it's not because of the complexity of the cyber underground, but also the impact on day-to-day users and so on. But I think overall, it is also very important for us to reflect, at least at this level, that everybody gets it when it comes to security, that security is important. But the reality is that not everybody can afford security because, of budget, or they don't have resources, or maybe they don't think about it in advance, nor do they have the capabilities to do security. So we're looking at small businesses, individuals, and even some governments. When it comes to cybersecurity, I think the topic of cybercrime and cyber criminal groups has been addressed or mentioned a few times. But I think it is still important for us to recognize that, yes, cybercrime is an element, but many of the incident responders are also dealing with threats carried out by nation-state actors. Of course, when dealing with a cybersecurity incident, the priority is to mitigate, to stop the attack. But at the end of the day, there's this whole issue about attribution. I think this goes back to the discussion of cyber norms, making sure that we don't do anything that will disrupt the stability of the internet, and make sure that things don't escalate, so that we don't have side effects, unintended side effects to businesses, to our day-to-day activities, and so on and so forth. So the question is, I think, when it comes to cybersecurity, again, is yes, we get all of this issue, but the real question is, how do we do it? How do we prioritize? How come this is not working? How can we work together? So I think I hear this a lot being echoed, being repeated in many places. So perhaps the best practice forum could be a useful avenue to discuss some of these issues that people find really interesting. When it comes to cooperation, I think this is something that we all care about as well. From the incident response perspective, I think there is an active community that has been working together voluntarily even before the norms were being discussed. And this is the CERTs and the security researchers community, who are like the firefighters. So since the very beginning, I think people get it that we can share information so that others can learn from the experience of others. In the same line, it is also interesting to see that back in 2014 that there was a best practice forum on establishing CSIRT and supporting CERTs at the IGF. And I think the question is, it's not so much about the establishment of the CERTs, but today the issue is, how do we grow and expand this network and make sure that it is continued and it received the support from other stakeholders. And the thing is, many of this the CERT communities are actually working together closely, not only in terms of sharing information, but also doing capacity building, sharing lessons learned, as well as in many cases, they do joint exercises, right? Making sure that when there is an emergency, we sort of know who to contact, what to do, who to reach out. And that suggestion about getting policymakers to get involved in tabletop exercises is great, but I think it would be nice if you can actually link it to an existing work that is already done by various communities like FIRST, AP CERT, Africa CERT. So to me, the opportunity is, one, bringing this community to the surface to talk to the rest of us. And number two, to recognize that there are already work there that we can leverage as a community, and we don't have to start from scratch. Thinking about one exercise that was, I think, really significant in the Asia Pacific region was the drill, the AP CERT drill in 2007, just before the Beijing Olympics. So I mean, this work has been going for a while now. Now, the last point I want to make about capacity development, yes, I think, again, this is another topic that everybody feel that it is important. Every time we go out, people say, let's do more of capacity development. But I think the issue there is manifold. One is that people want capacity development, but they're not willing to allocate resources for capacity development, right? So you don't have people to join the activity, and there is no follow-up. There is no opportunities given after doing capacity development to actually practice what you learn and what they do. So I think the issue there is a bit of at a higher level, and has to be addressed, there. But also, I think when it comes to capacity development, the product is not just training, because I think there is a misconception that capacity development is always only about training, but it can be in other forms. It could be like mentoring. It could be sharing information. It could be inviting people to join the community. I'll give one example. The first, the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams has a fellowship program where they reach out to teams in places where they don't have representation within FIRST. To make sure that every location is covered, every economy is covered, so that if we need any help in any location, we have people that we have spoken to before and trust. So we can do this proactively. So it's not just training, it's actually the community actively reaching out. So I think this is another thing that other stakeholders need to recognize as well, that there could be opportunities to support, and not only support, but also not to interfere with some of this work that is there already. Because sometimes there are things like sanctions that prevent the community with working with their counterparts in certain economies, right? So I think in short, there's a lot of discussions that can be put forth, but again, time would be definitely a challenge to address all of this. But at least if you can surface some of these issues within our discussion, I think it'll be great. And we can then share resources where, if people want to go to reach out and learn more, where they can go to do so, and so that we can continue the discussion. And I think in the end, it will help us to formulate a better approach to dealing with cybersecurity challenges that we are facing today. So that's all I've got for now, Amrita. And if anyone would like to chat, yeah.
Thank you. It's been really informative. And just to add, whatever we're discussing today, we will have the updates shared when we start our main session, at IGF. So we'll come to, there may be some questions for you, Adli. We'll come to that. But first we move to Mallory, and she would be sharing a bit on the security of digital products and encryption, especially encryption, because she's, very active in the Global Encryption Coalition. Mallory, what do you think are the things which should be discussed, the linkages which should happen, and what is IGF missing this time?
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. It's going to be a challenge to be the very, very last speaker of the entire day, because so much very smart, on-point things have been said and everyone's heads are very full. But I think if I can stick to some high-level points from the encryption perspective, and also the way that I think these conversations should be playing out in the IGF, then maybe I won't take too long, and also will give you something new to think about. One thing I would note just in general is, while Adil it's really nice to hear you saying that, there's more of a human element in like response mitigation and so on. I'm seeing a trend where there's become a lot more technical nuance in the sort of policy space. And I think that can be very useful. I think it's really necessary, because as we've sort of over the last many years, going on more than one decade now, been talking about issues like encryption or security standards and that sort of thing, cybersecurity, we've had to become more nuanced and more specific. And so I'm happy to see that as a trend, and I hope it'll continue. So one thing I'd like to see at this upcoming IGF is a lot more specificity when talking about some of these high-level issues. What exactly are we talking about with respect to the kind of encryption, the technology we're speaking of, and who are we talking to? And that is my first point. I was at the Paris IGF. This was the same year, it was mentioned before, that the Paris Accord was released. I was on a high-level panel about trust in cybersecurity, or in trust in cyberspace. And I spent most of my time trying to convince the French, US, and Chinese governments, who were also represented on that panel, that they couldn't really have it both ways. They had to either focus on building trust, or they could continue to talk about the fear, uncertainty, and distrust, is it FUD, that is pervasive in sort of national security sort of rhetoric around why surveillance is important and why encryption is a hindrance and all of that, because they were trying to do both at the time. And I think we've seen that some democratic governments, at least foreign ministries, other parts of governments have been very explicit that they support encryption, all of that. But then at the same time, we have seen the Five Eyes countries plus Japan and India put out a statement saying that they think encryption should be meddled with, essentially. We've also seen, while one side of the EU or the EC is saying they support encryption, the other side is commissioning reports on, the 12 to 13 ways you might go about breaking end-to-end encryption if you'd really want to. So we see that the governments are not monolith, and they're still continuing to, while I think they've improved their image on the, being explicit about wanting to support, cybersecurity for end users, putting people at the center, supporting strong encryption. Not all government agencies are behind that, even in democratic countries. So we have to now look at what agencies or what parts of government still are sort of talking cross purposes. Everything from, commissioning, procuring targeted and or mass surveillance tools to, over ambitious export controls that create imbalances across the world. And then, of course, then we're talking about like how you might disrupt all kinds of encryption, not just end to end. And so, yeah, I think we need to think of that as an overall theme, like when you're speaking and when you're advocating, who exactly are you implicating? And then also, of course, private sector companies that cooperate with, law enforcement or intelligence communities by providing products, and then at the same time are offering those strong products in other ways. So let me think about some sessions. So I know that there's at least one session on encryption. There, I think the idea is that my participation in it's going to really focus on a couple of different things. One is, I think, how we confront some tensions around what end-to-end encryption prevents in terms of content moderation or other kinds of interventions that are becoming, really critical, such as the detection and mitigation of child sexual abuse material, terrorist content, other things. And then the other one, I believe, is just around, becoming very, very clear about what strong encryption looks like, strong end-to-end encryption looks like, and what happens when you have, for example, a democratic government saying, yes, we believe in strong end-to-end encryption. We'd just like to look at the content of those messages, but it should be fine. It's still end-to-end encrypted. And actually, that's a false statement from a technical perspective. So how do we unpack that, and how do we define, what actually is strong end-to-end encryption? So yeah, I would like to see sessions that talk explicitly about encryption, have it on their agenda, get specific about what they're talking about, because we've seen also in the last year or two, also encryption of the DNS. So this is sort of privacy preserving measures to make DNS queries go through transport encryption. This is meant to protect, your user's domain name queries from being public in the clear text, away from advertisers, away from ISPs. But it has then created tensions with a few other things. Actually, the first and the most vocal, again, was governments, particularly the UK government, because it's the biggest censor in the world, blocking over 400,000 URLs by domain name at the ISP level, and DNS encryption broke that capability. I think they've sort of repivoted. So now a lot of those ISPs offer encrypted DNS so that they get to still sort of intercept your queries, but they do it such that nobody else can intercept them, which is helpful. DNS encryption is one. Another one is, again, the difference between transport level encryption and end-to-end encryption, getting very specific about what that means. And then what kinds of end-to-end encryption are we talking about? That can also have some nuance. the different features, for example, of encryption. Another one that I believe we're going to see a lot of with relation to the other part of the session, not just on encryption, but on procurement, is that we'll see both discussion about export controls. I wouldn't call that necessarily sanctions, although we did see, for example, this isn't an export control, but this is a procurement control that just came out while we've been in the session, that the US has controlled now the Pegasus, the NSO group Pegasus software, based on all the recent reporting about how it targets everyone from politicians to political dissidents. So that's an interesting one. And I think those trends might be part of some undertones anyway of maybe the cybersecurity treaties piece. And then procurement as being a really important one. I'm seeing that rising up in the ways that governments, democratic governments, are starting to talk to one another about alignment. So trying to align, from because I think, and maybe others got into this before and more in depth, I think one challenge right now is we're trying to define sort of the good internet versus the bad internet, but we can't get past this like geopolitical pinning of the two. And we just keep referring to like certain states as if they're monolith and as if that's the issue, rather than the more helpful thing, which would be to talk about behavior, and to talk about, the actual, what does a good internet mean? What does bad internet mean? I think we keep dodging that and trying to confront that conversation. But one thing I do see that when the states, the good states with the good internet trying to align one another, they're trying to do so with talking about things like procurement and data flows, and how do you define certain norms such that there can be interoperability and there can be essentially like treaties amongst them rather than sort of globally. So those I expect to see. I don't know enough about those, but I suspect they've been discussed enough already today that I will get to learn a lot from attending those sessions. And then I guess I'm not sure where we're at with time, but I have just a whole list of topics that I could run through. If you'll allow me, I can absolutely stop. That's fine. Maybe if you just give me one.
We are kind of running about
Sure.
15
Yeah,
minutes.
totally fine.
I can give you 2-3 minutes in case you want to.
Yeah, sure. So I think, again, there's some tensions that beyond the ones that I've already mentioned before, such as like content moderation and into encrypted environments. There's also tensions along with other public interest concerns, such as accessibility of tools that are secure, the ability to measure and to hold accountable network activity also becomes an issue. The move to actually shut down or aggressively filter and censor parts of the internet, again, this is a behavioral issue that, if we continue to push for more and better secure protocols, that tends to result in more and more effective information controls that become very aggressive. We've seen, for example, the first time a whole country, China, blocking content not based on the content or not based on who it's from or where it's going, but based on the protocol that it's using, which I think is probably not a great trend. Other things that we need to look at, sort of real infrastructure and architectural trends. We're seeing that in order for private sector, I think, to start to better monetize and siphon off in a sort of abstraction layer, we're seeing a lot of innovations around routing. And then what are the implications, however, then for that kind of routing for things like user privacy, network neutrality, centralization of the network, and all of those things actually do have a massive impact on security and cybersecurity, because it creates massive fail points, and it makes the internet less of a sort of network of networks in a distributed and interoperable manner, and it centralizes a lot of control into really large companies and networks that can afford to route essentially entire swaths of traffic end to end, meaning that there's a lot of implications there. So I would say that one thing that I think has always consistently been missing that I would like to see more of also this year is more civil society advocates and participants that are also tech experts. and that are also trying out their own implementations and are actually getting their hands dirty with coming up with alternatives. We spend a lot of time talking about really big tech companies. There are also medium-sized tech companies that are deeply affected by these issues. We'd like to see more of those. And then, of course, there are bottom-up solutions as well, everything from mitigation to training to actual implementations of some of these standards into their own products. And it would be great to have a lot more of those views on offer in these discussions. So I'll end with that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mallory. I think you raised really important points. It is important to get deep into issues, not saying that, you know, encryption is good or encryption is bad, why you should not break encryption, and how, getting into the details is important, because we all know the, narrative at this point of time, but how and why is the important things, and what can be the options. If not this, I think that's what governments look at least in India, the conversation. So I don't want to get into it now. But we have a few questions, and Sheetal, you could look at them. I could see one from Yik Chang Chin, where she mentioned she had a question for John, and she said that why you think the attempt, not by Russia or others, for reshaping the existing rule or norm is problematic. I think she's referring to the new convention which is being discussed, cybercrime and.
Sure, and thanks so much for the question and an opportunity to kind of clarify. I don't think we inherently, at Microsoft see anything inherently problematic with exploring a new cybercrime treaty or convention. If governments want to go about doing that, that's obviously their responsibility and prerogative. It does raise concerns, and it's somewhat curious that there's sort of more interest in building a new international instrument as opposed to leveraging existing ones, most notably the Budapest Convention as well as others. And we have seen governments in various parts of the world use cybercrime legislation, domestically at least, as an opportunity for controlling speech and expression online, in particular, political speech and expression. So I think those are some of just the red flags. From an industry, just from Microsoft's operational perspective, we also rely on instruments like the Budapest Convention ourselves to be able to cooperate and combat cybercrime. And so if you have new instruments that could create kind of overlapping commitments or undermine one existing structure that has become important, we feel, to combating cybercrime, that would raise some concerns as well. But at the end of the day, I don't think we're necessarily against a new treaty as long as it is focused on addressing cybercrime and improving cooperation between governments on that within an appropriate scope of what cybercrime is and is not. And then again, I think some of these concerns have been validated by some of the proposals that we have seen, and I went through a couple of those examples earlier, in particular from the proposed draft text from Russia that seems more preoccupied with some of those state sovereignty concerns. This is why we joined on to and supported the Multi-Stakeholder Manifesto as kind of a first attempt to flag those concerns and just set some guardrails and something to point to throughout the negotiations in terms of how it can be an inclusive dialogue and how it can protect those kind of fundamental freedoms and rights. And then most importantly, I think for this audience is, these deliberations really can't fly under the radar. And it really needs to be a part of a broader multi-stakeholder community discussion, and which is why we hope it will feature more prominently in IGF discussions going forward.
Thank you, John. Sheetal, do we have any comments or questions in the chat? Or if anyone wants to ask a question or share a comment, you can always raise your hand.
Thanks so much. I can see just a couple of comments, including around the issue of encryption. And I saw that there was also a comment about an earlier speaker who mentioned the issue of resources and political will versus need. And so there seems to be some really key points that have come up through this discussion that we certainly would want to see reflected and discussed further at the IGF in both next month, but also going forward. So I think unless anybody has a specific question, those were more comments than anything else. But so we encourage you to add questions to the chat or raise your hand.
Yes. I guess we don't have any questions or comments at this point of time. I could see some comments from Mark. I guess what we could do is we look at, I'll request Eleonora to share how the main session is looking like at this point of time. But please note there would be some changes. So you can look at, she shared the link in the chat. And this year we are, the theme, what we have mentioned is Trust Matters, exploring ways for building a safe and secure cyberspace. And we are actually, having, firstly, we will be summarizing what the discussions of the preparatory session is, and then we would be highlighting the main trends. There would be speakers speaking on what they see as the main trends. We would have open use case discussions from a youth organization who's working on this issue, and from journalist perspective, from Amnesty, especially related to the Pegasus, issue. And then we have an open discussion where speakers share their take on the main trends and highlight the different approaches, and also sharing what measures are required, and discuss what role different stakeholders can play, and what is the role that IGF can play. Because if we want to strengthen IGF, we really have to make it more effective, and what could be the way. So this is what we are looking at. But in case any of you feel that there's something missing or something which needs to be added, like for example, Zhaodong shared that there should be some discussion on data governance, especially related to cyber norms, etc., trying to link it there, or Mallory sharing that we need to have more specificity in issues, as in case any of you think, obviously we'll ask the speakers, but we'll also ask the participants, if you think we are missing something in the discussion, what is it we could add. But of course, I will add the caveat that we can't change the program completely, but we can try to, kind of get things in there. Sheetal, if I've missed something, you can add.
I think what's important maybe to note is that we will be capturing all the key points that have come through. And there were a really wide range of suggestions and potential areas to dig into deeper, including that point was made around the need for collaboration and how that can be done, and challenges for that, and the need to build on existing efforts among different communities and link them up together. And then those points around specificity, definitions around encryption, but also, so getting a lot more detail on these topics. All of that will be captured in following this session, and then we'll be able to relay that and feed that into the rest of our discussions. So yes, although we're not able to do a full summary here because so much has been said over the past 90 minutes, just rest assured that we will be capturing all of that. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Sheetal. So we have Yikchang Chin sharing an interesting comment, which she says is the most important political distinction among countries concerns not their form of government, but their degree of government. So the governance is more important than the forms of government, as in a democratic versus non-democratic. But I think we have 7 minutes to go, just in case any of our speakers wants to share something, or even add some comments which perhaps they missed, or some add their last moment comments. Please feel free to do so. as in anyone can speak, whoever wants to go first. Or anyone from the working group who wants to speak. So Mark makes a comment that I hope the rift with democratic governments on encryption can be bridged through dialogue with governments and parliamentarians at IGF. Yes, Mark, we all hope it would. And we hope that all the parliamentarians of all countries are there. For example, many parliamentarians are missing. I know of my country, they are missing, as in. So I think there should be more initiatives to bring parliamentarians of all countries there, or governments to, be there at the discussion. I think that's important. Many perhaps don't see the value of being at IGF. That's also a challenge. Lucian, do you want to add something as a summary or any comments? Or any of the speakers, just in case you have some last minute comments. If not, I have a request for all of you, the speakers, as I've mentioned in the mail, in case there are some critical points you want us to, capture in the summary report, please do share it with us. We've shared with you the Google document, or even you can mail it to us. That would be helpful because Sheetal would be summarizing this entire discussion at the main session. So I guess we are good at time, and if we do not have any other questions, comments, or anyone wanting to speak, Sheetal, do you want to add anything, or are we good?
I would just say, please do come to as many of the workshop sessions and to the main sessions for the BPF and the Dynamic Coalition as you can. Participate in those, share your perspectives and views. We definitely heard quite a lot of views today that we otherwise normally wouldn't in these discussions when they happen outside the IGF. So this is a really unique space. So do come to those and remain engaged. And yes, I will be typing up the summary, and will we be sharing that, Amrita, to the mailing list?
We could, so once we are done, we can. And the other question which we had, I had just forgotten, is how do we encourage participation of people who are not there? As in, Adli, you come from the certs, we don't have many of them coming, or, many of them whom many of us are involved in are not coming. How could we reach out to them and get them to these discussions? Like Mallory, you said that when we are discussing, even civil society takes the big five tech companies and speaks, but there are other small technology companies also who are not in the table, and they are also impacted. So what do you think, in case you have any suggestions of how we can improve our outreach and get them to the discussion, that would be, even if they come and hear, that's a good thing. We can get them engaged. So in case there is no answer, that's okay. But if you have some ideas, please do share. We want to increase the discussion of these issues with other people also who are impacted and who are not there. Yes, Mark, please do.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make a rather obvious point. The IGF has progressed to a hybrid format. And I remember in the days when it was very much a physical forum, that it was very difficult to get government, high-level government representatives to travel to an IGF event to participate. Also to get parliamentarians to do that, to find the time to be away from parliamentary business, votes and so on, to be able to attend. But now we're in a new era of the IGF, whereby online participation is on the same level as physical participation. So all of us, the stakeholders, should make this point very clear to law enforcement agencies, to government representatives, to your local parliamentarians, that they can participate online, and we need them there. I mean, this is a clear message from the UN Secretary General. We need governments, parliamentarians to be actively engaged in the IGF discussions to make them fully inclusive and productive in terms of outcomes that governments and parliamentarians can support. So, and that applies to law enforcement with regard to this very tricky, difficult issue of defending encryption, when there is strong public interest to say, well, encryption, you know, defends child abuse criminals online. You know, they're getting away with it. So how do we find a solution? Through dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I think that's a relevant point, and it was raised in the last session also, that governments are getting more involved. They will get more involved, but we need to have them more involved in IGF. But obviously, we should have the balance amongst other stakeholders also, not at the cost of having someone leading. But I think we are at the top of the hour, so I would say thank you to everyone, especially Adli, and as in to everyone. And Adli, I know it's like 2:30 a.m. for you now, and many people in the East, Joyce, etc. But thank you so much for everyone for being here and being part of it. Please do join the main session at Katowice. We'll be sending out the invite, and you know, at least share your views and comments. Thank you so much, everyone.